Hello, this is Lilian, welcoming you to the 1921st edition of the Enfield Talking Newspaper, Dateline the 19th of September 2013. The readers this week are Joan, Beverley, Rod and myself, Lilian, with Cassandra and Colin on the controls. The items that we will be reading come from our local newspapers, the Enfield Gazette and Advertiser and the Enfield Independent, and are their copyright. Our title music is Country Rock Polka, composed by Pat Prilly, Fernand Boulon, Harry Brewer, and performed by Jean-Jacques Perry, and is used with his kind permission. Local stories include award for scheme which has led to a 60% cut in youth crime levels, broken lifts, a warning of things to come at hospital, distribution centre to receive riot compensation, and we'll fight on despite setback. I have no special news items this week, so, and I must say also, sorry, I nearly forgot, do forgive me. If you are experiencing any problems receiving your Enfield Talking newspaper, please phone Diane D. Jersey on 0208 805 6578. That's 0208 805 6578. She is your listener's representative, and she will be pleased to help you. And now over to Joan, who will read the first item of local news.
2 years after it was destroyed in the London riots, insurance companies have won compensation from the police to pay for looting and arson at a Sony distribution centre. The Sony distribution centre in Solar Way, Enfield, was burnt down during the London riots of 2011. The High Court subsequently ruled last week that the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime, known as MOPAC, will pay for damage caused to the centre under the Riot Damages Act. The building was destroyed on August the 8th, 2011, and the barrister for the police argued this was a planned raid and not a result of the riot. But Mr. Justice Flows felt otherwise and said that the group of more than 20 youths were acting riotously. He also felt that the police could have prevented the incident after receiving numerous public calls after rioting in Enfield town the previous night, and with their fears that they could strike again. No amount has been set, but insurers for Sony wanted £49.5 million for the damage, while insurers for the owners of the warehouse had sought £9.35 million. The centre was rebuilt and reopened by Prime Minister David Cameron on Friday, September the 14th, 2012. A spokesperson for MOPAC said, "While we are pleased that the court has recognised MOPAC is not responsible for covering consequential losses, it is immensely disappointing that they have ruled that this was a riotous act. There is an important point of principle and public money at stake here, and we have sought leave to appeal."
Teenage thugs who terrorise younger schoolchildren by mugging them in broad daylight have been stopped in their tracks by an award-winning scheme. The raft of measures brought into the borough in 2009, in the wake of a spate of mobile thefts, has seen youth crime in Enfield drop by almost 60% in 4 years. By staggering school closing times, giving kids starting secondary school free mobile phone registration and setting up dispersal zones in high-crime areas, the police have been able to clamp down on the scourge of teenage criminality. Enfield Council's work with safer neighbourhood teams has included investing in diversionary after-school activities for teenagers and has seen teams of police officers scour the borough on the lookout for truants And 4 years after the start of the scheme, the council scooped the Problem-Orientated Partnership Award at New Scotland Yard last week. Praising the work of council and police officers, Cabinet Member for Community Wellbeing and Public Health, Christine Hamilton, said, "We do not tolerate crimes against young children, regardless of whom they are perpetrated by, and we have worked incredibly hard to make our schools' pupils safe and identify and capture those responsible for these despicable crimes. I'm delighted that street robberies against our children are at an all-time low, thanks to our efforts over the past 4 years. And this award is a testament to the hard work and dedication of council and police officers who put together a tremendous project to tackle a crime which is of great concern to school children and parents alike."
A dialysis patient who had his treatment delayed by more than an hour after broken lifts stopped him getting to his ward at North Mid Hospital said the hospital will not be ready for the closure of Chase Farm in 2 months' time. Gerard Lamb arrived for his usual appointment at 5:40 p.m. last Tuesday, but was prevented from getting to the ward on the 4th level of North Middlesex University Hospital's tower block because all 3 lifts were out of action due to refurbishment works. "I'm not mobile enough to walk the stairs myself," said Mr. Lamb, who has multiple health problems, including diabetes. "We were told to just sit there while the lifts got sorted. It's disgraceful that 3 main lift shafts were not working at any one time. We have often had to wait with only 1 lift not working. After a 45-minute wait, staff at the hospital in Stirling Way, Edmonton, decided to take patients up and down the tower block in a goods lift. The move meant that nurses had to accompany patients in the lift and also be on hand to assist at the entrance and exits. Mr. Lamb of Tinton Road, Wood Green, finally started his treatment at 7:15 p.m, and the delay meant that he did not get home until after midnight. North Mid has ongoing building works preparing for an influx of patients no longer able to go to Chase Farm in the Ridgeway, Enfield, for treatment. Last week, it was reported that the hospital's board has signed off the Barnet, Enfield and Haringey clinical strategy, which includes the downgrade of Chase Farm's accident and emergency, maternity and inpatient services, forcing patients instead to go to North Mid or Barnet Hospital. But Mr. Lamb's wife Elizabeth added, "They can't cope. North Mid is not ready for the downgrade." A spokesman for the hospital explained that during the refurbishment works, 1 lift had been kept out of action. He added, "Due to accidental damage and power failure, the other 2 lifts were put out of action for a period of 90 minutes on Tuesday evening. The maintenance company were contacted and resolved the problems. Both lifts have been fully working since then. The refurbishment is taking place while the tower block has only 2 wards within it, as we refurbish the remaining floors for clinical strategy. The refurbishment works remain on time."
I have Vicky Pipes' column. She is Environment Matters. She deals with them, rather. There is no more evocative word in the English language than autumn, the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. Thus it was that I visited the 60th Enfield Autumn Town Show, the high point of which is, for me, the horticultural marquee. This year there was some awesome sight of a pumpkin the size of a cupboard alongside exhibits of succulent blackberries and root vegetables, gladioli, beautiful flower arrangements, honey sponges and scones. The displays spoke powerfully of endeavour, warmth, pride and enthusiasm, and of patient dedication. And yet, sadly, the horticultural tent is a shadow of its former days because far fewer people participated than in the past. I wonder why. After all, Enfield has excellent gardening centres and allotments, and there's no shortage of advice on TV programmes and in gardening books. Have we simply forgotten the enjoyment to be had in sharing the Festival of Harvest? Capel Manor's Taste of Autumn last weekend carried on the good work of raising awareness of the borough's horticultural treasures, and it's great that I can buy locally grown produce nearby because Enfield Council and 40 Hall Farm have joined forces to provide us with a market garden. Let's hope more of us get involved in the Autumn Show 2014. From the traditional to the new. I loved the Cycle Enfield event. Motorists rejected their cars for the weekend to discover the joys of fresh air and exercise. It was a delight to see children and adults enjoying the huge range of bicycles, tandems and carry-me wheelbarrow bikes, proving that cycling has something for everyone. We've seen huge improvements recently in the cycling infrastructure. Greenways maintenance classes, training and fun days. So well done to our council in being shortlisted for the London Mayor's Mini Holland investment programme, and good luck in the final selection.
And here are the views of Michael Lavender, who is the Enfield Conservative Group leader. He heads his speech on improving infrastructure is key to sustaining our growth and regeneration. The government's economic plan appears to be working. Exports are up, business investment is rising, and the manufacturing and construction sections are growing. There are signs that we are building a balanced, sustainable and broad-based recovery that works for hard-working people and ensures Britain can compete in the global race. It is important, however, that Enfield benefits from this. In my opinion, the key to delivering economic growth and regeneration in Enfield lies in improving its infrastructure. The slow and painful M25 improvements, the proposed rail enhancements to Stratford, and the fact that Boris Johnson is taking control of the overground lines to Enfield Town and Cheshunt will certainly help. What is less helpful is the upskilling of people for unavailable jobs, which seems to be the main focus of Enfield Council's grants. Meanwhile, there are two possible bad news stories that I will address head-on, and which I make no apology for. One is the reduction in disposable incomes, and the other is the effect of universal credits. During the last economic boom, the country was living beyond its means. Credit and imports were cheap, and debts increased. Disposable incomes are now more sustainable, and we should avoid the temptation for another mad rush to a further unsustainable economic boom to restore what went before. Universal credits are not having an effect, not to the limit, but to a certain level. And that is a consequence of having a welfare system where work always pays more than benefits. It is important that if we are to build sustainable communities, that available but relatively unattractive jobs are made relatively more attractive to the locally employed. The situation whereby settled Enfield communities are better off on benefits than working, with a consequence that available jobs are filled only by new arrivals, often living in temporary accommodation, causes strain on the communities that we need to avoid.
The allocation of additional funding to deal with winter pressures on the emergency departments at both of Enfield's NHS hospitals does not bode well for the future. While the Barnet, Enfield and Haringey clinical strategy, which will see services removed from Chase Farm, will mean more consultant cover and expanded departments at North Middlesex and Barnet, the extra funding suggests that NHS bosses have doubts over whether the hospitals can cope. While board members at Barnet and Chase Farm and North Middlesex have decided the strategy needs to go ahead, it was hard to escape an overwhelming sense of fingers crossed. Perhaps the timeline for the implementation of the strategy should have been more flexible. Questions remain around recruitment and the readiness of staff, as well as the completion of building work at both hospitals.
And now more news around the hospital closures. Health bosses at Barnet and Chase Farm NHS Hospitals Trust have agreed that Barnet Hospital is ready to take on additional patients when the accident and emergency and maternity departments close at Chase Farm this November. In a significant step towards the downgrade of the hospital in the Ridgeway Enfield, the Trust Board unanimously agreed on Friday that it was safe to go ahead with the implementation of the Barnet, Enfield and Haringey clinical strategy. The £115 million strategy will see Barnet Hospital in Wellhouse Lane, High Barnet, and North Middlesex University Hospital in Stirling Way, Edmonton, take on extra patients following the downgrade of Chase Farm. Barnet Hospital was allocated £23 million in January to expand and improve maternity and A&E services, as well as provide 200 additional parking spaces. The hospital expects building work to be completed by November. However, health campaigners have said they believe that both Barnet and North Middlesex will struggle to cope with increased demand. Speaking to the Trust Board on Friday, Kieran McGregor of the Save Chase Farm campaign said, "Is the board aware that last year 158 women in labour were turned away from Chase Farm and Barnet hospitals because there were not enough beds? There is a serious concern about how Barnet will cope when maternity at Chase Farm shuts. And I am sure the members of the board have not worked with builders before because there is no way the work will be completed by November." Tarina Riches, Director of Nursing, said that the hospital did not need to recruit any midwives or gynecology consultants to maintain its 1 to 30 midwives to birth ratio, as staff would move from Chase Farm to Barnet. She added that the implementation of the strategy was necessary to improve performance. Kathy Giddes, Programme Director at the Trust, said that Barnet Hospital would have capacity for 6,000 births a year and that the Trust did not expect the number of annual births to be higher than 5,500. In 2012-13, 3,022 babies were born at Chase Farm and 3,281 at Barnet Hospital. Ms Giddes added that she was confident all building work would be completed on time. Chase Farm's maternity and inpatient paediatric services are due to close on November 20th, and the A&E department is expected to shut its doors on December 9th, after which it will be turned into an urgent care centre. The ultimate decision on the clinical strategy will be made next Wednesday by the Enfield, Barnet and Haringey clinical commissioning groups at a meeting to be held at Underhill Stadium in Barnet Lane, High Barnet, starting at 9 a.m. Last Tuesday it was announced that the Barnet and Chase Farm NHS Hospitals Trust would receive £5.1 million in additional funding from the Department of Health to deal with increased pressures on emergency services during the winter months.
An Enfield Council conduct meeting was held in private without the presence of either press or public on Monday night. Listed on the Council's website as a public meeting, when the Advertiser attended room 3 in the Civic Centre in Silver Street, Enfield, we were told that the information to be discussed in the meeting was confidential and could only be heard by councillors and council officers. Therefore, although it was clear the meeting was about the conduct of a councillor, the Advertiser was prevented from finding out the identity of the member under investigation. We were also stopped from finding out the nature of the investigation into the councillor's behaviour or what had prompted the probe. A council spokesman told the Advertiser press and public were excluded from the meeting to enable members to discuss exempt information regarding a complaint made about a councillor. The spokesman added that personal information relating to the councillor that was tabled to be discussed was protected under the Data Protection Act.
The Advertiser can exclusively reveal that the investigation into a raft of irregularities at a primary school has formally begun, months after concerns were first raised. The official investigation into irregularities in Level 6 SATS exams at Eversley School in Chaseville Park Road, Southgate, has been launched 2 months after it was first reported there were major inconsistencies in how the higher level exam had been administered. In July, it was revealed that the Department for Education had no record of any children in Eversley having been entered for the higher level 6 SATS exams, the SATs, and that no exam papers would have been sent to the school. However, parents and pupils believed they had sat the same exam that thousands of other Year 6 children across the country had done on the same day. When approached in July to ask how the exam paper the children sat had been obtained, the Board of Governors initially told the Advertiser that an investigation had been launched. That later emerged not to be the case, as the governors admitted that they would not begin formal investigations until the new term had started, 4 months after the children had set the tests in May. A statement issued by an Enfield Council spokesman on behalf of the Board of Governors said, "We can confirm the investigation into Level 6 SATs at Eversley Primary School has started and will report back in due course. Until this investigation has concluded, it would be inappropriate to comment further."
Children could be banned from playing in their nursery's garden following complaints about the noise by neighbours. Kay Wildman owns and runs Nursery on the Green in Chaseside, Enfield, which looks after 24 children under the age of 4, 5 days a week. Last year, Mrs. Wildman received 12 months planning permission from Enfield Council, allowing 9 children at a time to play outdoors for an hour and a half in the morning and also in the evening. It came after she lavished thousands of pounds on modifying the nursery's garden, specifically for playtimes. However, as the 12-month period is now up, Mrs. Wildman could be forced to keep the children indoors all day after neighbours complain that the sound of preschoolers playing during the day ruined their own leisure time. Their complaints have led planning chiefs to recommend that her bid to make the playtimes a permanent fixture should be rejected. There have been so many studies done on the benefits to children of outdoor play, said Mrs. Wildman. Children need access to the outdoors. Some of the children are with me 50 hours a week. Some live in flats and don't have any access at all to outdoor areas. Despite Mrs. Wildman's plea, the planning officer's report, to be presented to councillors at a planning committee meeting next Tuesday, cites the concerns of neighbours who suffer a discernible loss of amenity due to the sound of children playing. The report says the use of the rear garden area by children and staff of the nursery results in undue noise and disturbance detrimental to the amenities of the occupiers of adjoining residential properties. Mrs. Wildman added, "It saddens me so much that there are a few neighbours who would be prepared to deny the right of children to play outside." And the Advertiser comments as follows, that children will be children, and says, "What springs to mind when you think of a nuisance noise that ruins the peace and quiet of weekday mid-morning? The clatter and beep of a refuse lorry? Possibly. The sound of builders drilling and sawing at a neighbour's house? Probably. But the sound of children laughing, playing, or generally, well, being children, why should that take away enjoyment of the great outdoors? We all know that peace and quiet is as valuable as gold dust in our urban environment, but the sound of children playing is not the same as trains or cars or heavy industry. It is part of the natural world. If you have a problem with the sound of children at play, why should you stop toddlers from enjoying themselves? Why are the views of a handful of neighbours worth so much more to council officers than the rights and health of 24 children?
Organisers at the Lock to Lock festival admitted that the weather had had an impact on turnout, but were still pleased by the attendance. Weeks of planning the Lock to Lock festival in Enfield saw an abundance of events on offer for those who attended on Saturday, with live music from tribute band Beached Boys, girl group Ella Moore, and solo artist Keisha White. Funded by the Mayor of London Events Fund and organised by Enfield Borough Council, the festival transformed Prince of Wales playing fields in Ordnance Road, Enfield, with paddleboarding and canoeing staged along the lock. Canal taxis were a popular choice for children and adults who fancied an unconventional jaunt between the two sites. Ellie Robles, who organised the event, said, "I have been here, there and everywhere to make sure that everything runs okay. I'm really excited about it. We have been organising this for 7 weeks. The weather made an impact, and it's disappointing because the field isn't as well used, but we are making the best of it. The water activities has run as they would and haven't been affected because people are expecting to get wet." At the Navigation Inn in Wharf Road, Enfield, Sea Cadets were providing the canal taxi service. Alan Holloway, leader of the Enfield Sea Cadets, rued the weather's impact on the festival. He said, "It is a shame when you have weather like we did on Friday, but at least it hasn't rained today, and people are still showing up, which is great. We are here to promote the Sea Cadets and the work we do with teenagers, giving them the best setup to compete for employment and have a good basis for work." 9-year-old Thomas Cadwell said, "My favourite part was the canoeing. It was hard to do, but it was really cool." His mother, Jenny Caldwell, said, "The weather could have been better, but the water sports are just fantastic."
A care home has urged locals to take part in a community memory walk to raise money for dementia research. Booper's Wellington Park Nursing Home in Wellington Road, Enfield, organised the walk to raise money as part of the Alzheimer's Society Memory Walk initiative. The walk on Friday, September the 27th, will start at the nursing home at 2:15 p.m, and those taking part will also compete in a memory quiz along the way. Care home manager April Parrott Carter said, "I'm sure everyone, no matter what their age, will have a great time at these fun social events. We hope as many people as possible will join us to take part." We have now reached the end of side 1 of this tape. Please stop your machine now, take out the cassette, turn it over and start side 2.